Welcome to the High Performance Hockey Podcast. Today we're joined by assistant coach, University of Nebraska men's freestyle wrestling team, Tervel Dlagnev, and the head coach of the Pitt Panthers wrestling team, Keith Gavin. Tervel was one of the nation's best heavyweight freestyle wrestlers in history. He won the Olympic bronze medal at the 2012 London Olympic Games and placed fifth in the 2016 Rio Games. He also won world bronze medals for the United States in 2009 and 2014, and was a 2011 Pan American Games and 2008 University World Champion. In college, Tervel was a two-time NCAA champion and four-time All-American at the University of Nebraska, Kearney. Keith is the head coach, Pitt Panthers men's wrestling team. He is a 2008 NCAA champion, two-time NCAA All-American, two-time U.S. National Champion, 2013 U.S. World Team member, and 2008 World University Bronze medalist. This is a really awesome and really rewarding conversation for me to have and to give to all of you as a listenership. Both Keith and Tervel are dear friends of mine, lucky enough to be a very, very small part of their preparation process. And as they both had trained at Donskoff Strength and Conditioning, Tervel for his preparation for the Rio Games, and Keith as a member of the U.S. men's world team. Unbelievable experience, unbelievable human beings. And without a doubt, I'm sure you could say that I learned more from them than they ever did from me. Nonetheless, unbelievable conversation. We talk about mental toughness. What is it? Can you teach it? We speak about leadership, the cost of leadership, the tangible intangibles. It's a fantastic conversation. Welcome to the podcast. Gentlemen, welcome to the podcast. Thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Hey, guys, I thought about this before we got on the air and the title of what we wanted to speak about. And I came up with something to the effect of tangible intangibles, leadership and mental toughness. Like, let me ask you guys this to start, and Tervel, I'll open up with you. Are those tangible qualities? I know they're intangibles in the fact that you can't see them. But when you walk in coaching now at the collegiate level, can you see that in an athlete? Or is that something that you feel needs to be coached and harnessed and nourished?
That's a great question. I mean, I think over the years, I'm starting to go. When I first started coaching, I would have said, everyone's a clean slate. You can equip anyone with anything you need. But the longer I coach, I do think there's an intrinsic value of mental toughness. And I think some people have a greater propensity to develop. Some people maybe just haven't heard the right message or haven't accessed the right environment to get it. But I think that, yes, you see it. There's definitely tells of it. And I think that it's much, much more difficult to develop than I once believed.
Interesting. Keith.
Yeah, I agree. I think, in our position right now, a lot of it's recruiting, right? And you're getting these kids when they're 18 years old. So that's what you're kind of trying to sniff out, is who has that in them in the recruiting process. And that's why it's so competitive, because everybody's trying to do that. But yeah, I think if it's in them already, you can help bring it out. But I haven't had anybody yet that has gotten here that doesn't have that in them, and then we place that there,
Okay. I want to talk to you guys about your current landscapes now, and I do want to dig deeper into the leadership aspect and the mental toughness. So we're going to circle back to that. But I want to talk about right now the university landscape for wrestling. From a physical and mental perspective, you might not be just university, what are some of the common misconceptions that you guys have dealt with throughout your career in sport? Or are there? I'll give you an example. For me, as a strength and conditioning coach, when I started working with you guys, suffering is a rite of passage. Harder the better. Do you see, what are some of those common misconceptions in the sport of wrestling? Educate our audience. Most of it's going to be hockey.
Yeah, I think it's very similar to what you just said. That was really, in our sport, is almost like you just got to be tougher than the other guy. And that is slowly, I think, people are becoming more aware that there's a little more to it than that. This is a skill-based sport, just like anything else. And so toughness is definitely required, but you're not just going to out tough somebody if you have no skills, right? So, and I mean, at the end of the year, our national tournament, a lot of it is about getting when you have the skills and you have the toughness, it's about making sure that you're prepared and physically ready to go. And so I think our sport has gotten a lot better at that, and probably still has some ways to go. But I would say when Terrell and I wrestled, it was still kind of back in the old days where you had to grind 24/7, and if you couldn't do that, you just weren't tough enough. Where obviously there's some other things involved.
Really quick, T, before you transition, Keith, it brings up such a great point. You said skills. Like
Mhm.
I'll give you a perfect and proximate example, and this is I love this guy. Like I've read his books. I love David Goggins. David
Mhm.
Goggins was a corner man recently and trained
Yeah,
Tony
so,
Ferguson in his fight. You
yeah,
can yell everything you want and scream as loud as you want, but the individual that he faced outskilled him, right? That's the skill of mixed martial arts. It doesn't matter, not that the inspiration doesn't help, but at the end of the day, if you can't play the guitar and you're in an orchestra, you got problems.
right. Yeah, I think it's just, I mean, that's kind of what's fun about our sport too. I mean, you take pride in the toughness aspect of it. I think that's necessary. You also get to be kind of get creative with your skill, and I think that's a lot of fun to kind of put those puzzle pieces together. And the guys who do that well end up having the most success.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of have some thoughts on this. So just kind of to piggyback off I think that sometimes you just like visually grade the situation. And a lot of the things we do, a lot of the books, right? So a lot of the people that write the books are the people that did spectacular things. And a lot of it is like, this is what I did, you can too, right? So a lot of things we do is like, well, he did it. Let's look at his life and let's recreate it. And maybe we recreate the result. But I don't think that's always accurate, because I think the toughest people, it's almost like they had toughness in them, so they did hard things.
Hmm.
The hard things didn't give them the toughness gave them the ability to do hard things. So we think that, well, they grind, they grind, they grind. Sometimes the messaging in sport is, well, if you can withstand it, do all this tough stuff and it'll harden you. It's like, no, you're actually you're moving the needle. This, you're already very tough. Right. So there's definitely avenues where you have to specify, like, okay, in these situations, you're under extreme anxiety, extreme discomfort, make good decisions, but it's not always just the work. So absolutely, that was the first one I had down, was throw hard work at it. Common misconception, right? You just, hey, harder, throw hard work at it. But there's a couple other ones that annoy me too over the years, that one is that's kind of bleeding into. So now we're going into more of like the country club mentality is
Huh.
bleeding into our blue collar sport a little bit. And it's not you, it's your surroundings.
Mhm.
Right. So that's a misconception, right? It's like,
Wow.
I just don't ever remember a moment in my life, when you were coaching me, when I lost a wrestling match, it never even crossed my mind to say, I wonder what Anthony's going to do so that I don't lose again.
Yeah.
No, it's what am I going to do so I
Yeah.
don't lose again? It's not what is my coach going to change so that I don't lose? Like, no. What am I going to change? So it's not change your surroundings necessarily. Sure, there's toxic environments and you got to read the room, but for the most part, deep intrinsic belief in your support staff will develop you much faster than holding your support staff in an audition. Hey, Anthony, I'll let you train me for 6 months. If I'm a national champion, then I'll give you another 6 months. No, there's no
Mhm.
development. It's like this. Tell me what to do. I believe you. That's how you develop. That's how you develop. So change your surroundings. Another one, very common, the time spent delusion. We think we do something more than we do. The time spent delusion is this. In wrestling, because it's such a hard sport, you don't do it 9 to 5. You can't 9 to 5 wrestling. You do an hour in the morning, an hour and a half in the afternoon, 4 or 5 days a week max, or else you're toast. So you do skills in the morning. Let's say three mornings of the week, which probably is more than most. We do an hour of skill. Me and I but I have to have a partner, and they're not just going to be a punching bag. So they get half of it, I get half of it. They get 30 minutes of focused skill work. I get 30 minutes of focused skill work 3 times a week, which is way more than most people. That's an hour and a half. So a week. So we do that for 4 weeks. Now we're sitting at about 6 hours. I do that for 3 months. I'm at 18 hours of work. If someone 3 mornings a week for 3 months did one skill, they would think that they should have it mastered. I've done this for eternity. I've been doing this forever. I have it. Let's move on, coach. No, you've done it for 18 hours. Stop it. Right. So that was an extreme example. Sometimes we come in here, we work skills twice a morning for 30 minutes for 2 weeks. And kids are like, oh, I get it. It's like, no, you don't get it. The times people think they're spending so much more time than they actually are in focused work. You got to really compartmentalize, like, no, I haven't spent that much time. And then the last one for me is the speak it into existence, right? The anxiety, positivity to relieve anxiety, right? The second you walk off a loss, you're better than that guy. Well, I just lost. What do you mean I'm better than that guy? You're just telling me that to make yourself and me feel better. The better wrestler lost. What? That doesn't make any sense. He just kicked my butt for the 3rd time in a row. Man, that guy can't beat you. We just did, right? So silly stuff like that. So just speak it into existence. That guy will never beat you again. How do you know? So I think that a lot of times we throw positivity into the air so that we can just relieve the anxiety of both the coach and the athlete. And it adds stress to the next time. Because if I promise my athlete, you'll never lose to that man again, the next time you're faced with him and you realize that you got to go out and beat him, you start thinking, but I thought I can never lose to him, right? You're not ready to fight him. You think you've already won. So it doesn't prepare you for the fight. I think we got to live in reality a little more. I think you got to challenge people more than hand them success on a silver platter. You're so good. You're going to win. You're the champ. You're the best. You're going to do it. There's no chance. No one works as hard as you. That's crazy talk. You have no idea what everyone's doing.
Wow, you need to write a book, T. I've told you that. But circling back really quick before I change the questioning over regarding your first 2, hard work. I saw a tweet just today. Actually, it's hilarious. Perfect timing. It said, "If hard work led to success, the donkey would run the farm." And then last one, this time spent delusion reminds me of a conversation I had with a Hall of Fame National Hockey League coach. I asked him who his favorite player or who the best player was that he ever coached. And he immediately shouted off a name. And as a passionately curious person I said, why? And he said he embraced the monotony of being a pro. And if you look at strength and conditioning, and we don't need to toy it around there, but like the basics done masterfully well, time and time again. I get it, the programming variables along the way, resistance, variety, but the basics done extremely, extremely well can lead to fantastic results over time, but you got to embrace that monotony. All right, we're going to switch this up. Keith, I'm throwing it up at you. So we're going back to this subject of mental toughness. How has that changed for you? Meaning, what was it like for you as a wrestler? And then looking at the lens now, has it changed as a coach? You're a storied wrestler, your career. How did you view it when you were a young guy coming up?
I don't know. I think this all goes kind of, a lot of what Terrell is saying is it kind of boils down to just having awareness, a lot of it. When I was an athlete, I don't know if I had that as much as this. I just really enjoyed wrestling, so I did a lot, and then I got good at it. And obviously I'm simplifying, but the mental toughness thing for me was just kind of like, I just grew up in an environment where it was like, there was no other option. Like that was like the worst thing, is if you weren't tough, quote unquote, So like I had that like thought that just, I wasn't a soft person, Now as a coach, it goes into like when you're trying to teach the guys, again, it's just like what I'm really trying to do. Like, we don't even talk necessarily that much about mental toughness. Like a lot of the talk is just helping them become more aware. I think the best guys we've had are the most self-aware guys that we have, and those are like living in reality a little bit more. Like the positive talk thing, I think, is a great example. Sometimes you think everybody tells you got to think positive, you got to do this, you got to do that. And then like that's just not realistic. Like everybody, no matter how good you are, has those doubts creep in, and you have the like, well, what if he does this, or what if my favorite technique doesn't work? And then what I found is like it's helpful to just like you see that you're aware of that's happening, and then you're able to kind of pick through it. Like, okay, well, what if my move doesn't work? Well, that's okay. I have other ones. You know what I'm
Sure.
saying? And
Yep.
so there's so much like avoidance going on, and I think that is a lack of mental toughness when you don't address how you're really thinking or how you're really feeling. And so if you can address it and then move past it, that type of awareness goes a long way towards being mentally tough.
I think what you said there too, and Keith, I'm just the kind of athlete that I had the opportunity to watch you, have the opportunity to train you for a little while. But the kind of person you are, you could tell you were raised in a blue collar, hardworking family. It reminds me of a story. I had the opportunity to speak with Dale Hunter. He coached with my brother Mish. Dale Hunter played almost close to 1,500 games in the National Hockey League, had over 3,000 penalty minutes. So one of the toughest guys in the league. And his dad, Dickie Hunter, God rest his soul, just recently passed. He told me some stories about Dale, and he said he was getting ready to drop off Dale in junior hockey. He got the hockey bag out, threw it out of the pickup truck, and said, "Go on, son. You got nothing but cornfields waiting for you if you don't do it." Like you're raised in that environment, man. Like that hard work is part of who you are.
Yeah, I think that going back, Tervel was saying this earlier, but that's kind of what's maybe more of a challenge now as a coach is well, just in collegiate athletics, the transfer portal stuff. Now you could transfer
Yes,
it, at any time, and
anything.
there's really no rules to it anymore. I mean, you can just go, and that stuff just didn't exist when we were coming up. Like you had to get through some stuff. If you were, you can't just at the first sign of adversity jump ship. And so that I think has been a little more of a that's just what we're dealing with right now. So
Sure.
that's a little bit more of a challenge as a coach.
T, passing the baton to you. Mental toughness, did it change for you as an athlete looking now as a coach? Let's start your athletic career.
Yeah, absolutely. So I started wrestling later than most people. I started in high school. So my mode of catching up was always like I had two modes. I had learn all the moves. So I was like neurotic about receiving information and wisdom. If someone wanted to help me, I would listen very attentively. So I never counted an opinion out. So I think that was helpful to a way. I think eventually there comes a time where you have to shrink the chefs in the kitchen. But when I was young, it was like, this is how I'm going to catch up with all the lost time is just learn, learn, learn. And number two was tough, right? Like do more than
Yes.
anyone. First one in, last one out. So that was my idea. And I still feel that philosophy right now in my lower back, right? That's like, so, but now it's gone to, what we've been talking about, what Keith said, just self-aware, realistic, and there's a base level of submission that you have to have in every sport. So the most extreme I would say is rodeo. Rodeo, the base level of realism you have to have is you might die. You're getting on a 3,000-pound animal. As much as this is a sport, you could die or get severely injured. If the cowboy is not okay with that, he'll never be good because you'll always be trying to avoid injury or death. So the best cowboys somehow have taken that thought, shoved it in their subconscious, and said, you know what? I already know I might die, but now that I'm okay with, now what? What's the technique to win? I know I might die, but how do I win? So for wrestling, it's not as dramatic. And for most sports, for wrestling, it's you might not achieve your dream. You might fall short. You might lose. That's the base level of realization that you have to submit to is there is no way to guarantee victory. You enter the arena as an unknown. You can win, but you can lose. Well, of course I can lose. Now what? That's the healthiest first step. I already know, yes, I know I can lose, but until I lose, what should I do? And now you can shrink it and be present. But I think there's a lot of people that are deathly afraid. They're searching for a guarantee. And I think mental toughness has perverted that fight, because mental toughness at its most immature is do everything in your power so that you will not lose, right? You hear t-shirt slogans like he won that match before he ever walked out. No, he didn't. We talk. No, how that game was over before they ever went out on the ice. No, it wasn't. Literally 0-0. So that's an impossibility that we just like to put on t-shirts. So I think that trying to skirt around the reality that your dreams might not come true is failing you more than it's helping you. And once you come to grips with that, you can take the next steps. And mental toughness, I love the Navy SEALs definition of mental toughness. And that's the ability to control the human stress response. That's mental toughness as the SEALs see it. And I think it's a beautiful definition. It's when you get high anxiety, think clearly. Do the right thing. Speak truth to yourself and engage.
This episode has been brought to you by the High Performance Hockey Masterclass. The High Performance Hockey Masterclass is a comprehensive lecture series exploring the science and practice of high performers in the sport of ice hockey. It was designed and created and engineered by myself, Anthony Donskoff. It is an 8-part lecture series that includes metric fixation, the tyranny of metrics, reading research, what matters, going back to get my PhD as a 40-year-old, how do you target your readings in terms of digesting, accumulating, and reading your research, biomechanical considerations for ice hockey, the adductor magnus, how we program hip health during the off-season and in-season, the Gain, Go, Grow model, this idea of a 3-day rollover program for high-performance hockey players, considerations for the in-season, how to manipulate that model for high performers, our communication structure within the confines of Donskoff Strength and Conditioning, and finally, the fast and frugal tree, considerations for return to play. More information on the High Performance Hockey Masterclass can be found at anthonydonscov.gumroad.com. Thanks for listening. That's beautiful, and it literally ties into my next point. And Keith had mentioned this prior. He talked about someone working on mental toughness. Maybe there's a move that needs to be practiced. You talked about the physiological response. Would you all agree on this panel that mental toughness is task specific? If I'm jumping out of a helicopter, my stress response is going out of the roof with a parachute. If I'm on the ice and something happens to me, minor palpitations. Would you guys agree with that?
100%.
And then the question is, Keith, and I'll turn this over to you, is how do you coach mental toughness? Is it all in drilling, or do you speak and verbalize that with the group as well?
I think that a lot of it is like question based. Like you just, because I think they know, like your athletes will know if they're being real with themselves. Especially at the ages that we have them. But not always, but often you kind of just peel back the layers of the onion by asking them questions, of what they're dealing with or think they're dealing with, and perspective could really be helpful in those situations. And I think the more you gain like the proper perspective on things, your response is better in stressful situations. So just helping them gain that awareness by asking questions, because I think sometimes that's the job of the coach. Is really, it's not so much like you tell them what to do, because look, if you're really trying to be great at something, which a lot of collegiate Division I collegiate athletes are, there's not like an instruction manual to that. Not
That's
like
right. That's right.
like you have you see on Twitter like the 10 steps to or the morning routine or whatever you're gonna it's
don't
like,
get me started.
you can follow whatever morning routine you want, but it's not, and it goes like Terrell was mentioning, like the guys that write the books were the ones that were really successful, and there's certainly some value to that. I think you can gain inspiration from reading certain books and doing like that, but you'd be misguided to think like, I'll just copy what he did, because probably a couple things, probably he's only remembering the highlights when he wrote that book. Right. And then also, like, it'd be hard for whoever you're trying to follow to retrace their steps and do it exactly the same. So it's your own journey. And And yeah, I think the job of the coach is kind of just to peel back some of the layers of that onion and help them become more aware.
T, same question.
Yeah, I mean, I really, I mean, it's exactly right. I think the question, I mean, I'll just tell you, you try to paint the picture for your athletes that if they've thought it, you've thought it, right? Because sometimes, there's a superhero effect. Well, of course, Tervel can do this because he beat this guy and there's this and he had these. No, no, no. But it's like I was nervous as crap every time I did something cool. I never thought my moves were going to work. I was deathly afraid of getting tired. I was deathly afraid of not succeeding, of being embarrassed, of losing to someone who I didn't respect as an individual, right? I mean, there's people that I'm like, instead of thinking about wrestling, there's high profile matches in my life where I'm like, if I lose to this guy, I'll never leave my room, never. I will have I won't I can't respect myself if I lose to this person. But that's not going to help me beat him. It was always just like Keith said, a series of questions. I would question. My question to myself was always, "Well, do you want to quit?" That was my joke, right? That was my joke. Was if you don't like, no one's holding a gun to your head, you can walk out of this arena right now. Walk out. And then my answer was always, well, okay, I'm not going to quit. Now what? So I always got to now what? Because the first fork in the road was you can walk out or you can like leave the arena. Where did Tervel go? I don't know. He didn't show up. He went home and watched Netflix. Well, that's not going to happen. I'm walking out. So now what? Okay. Well, then can you score? Yes. Can you score on him? I don't know. Well, let's go try. Can you stop people from scoring? Well, yes. Can you stop his shots? I don't know. Well, let's go try. So we always got around to let's go try. But it was through a series of self questioning and sometimes very wacky, crazy things, right? Where it's like, okay, well, listen, if you're that scared and you're that nervous, don't go out there, man. And then it became like a joke to myself. But I think you kind of try to track through some of these thought patterns and help your athletes think through some of the stuff because it's a part of the match. If you're trying to avoid the mental side of it, if you're trying to prepare so well physically that the mental side is not in play, you're off script. It's always there. It's always there. So much so that you got to prepare for it every time like a match. Part of your warm up. Here come the doubts. I know exactly what to say to myself. I was ready for you. Haha. You can walk out of the arena, chicken, right? I was very self-deprecating. I was very self-deprecating in my humor to myself. Like, just walk forward, you pussy. I mean, it was just as silly as that is. It's like, what are you doing? Like, do you want to wrestle or do you just want trophies? Go enter a junior high tournament. I bet you'll win it. So like, it was very self-deprecating to myself, but it helped me realize what I came to do. I wanted to see if I could be good. I didn't want them to just hand me medals. I wanted to see if I was actually good. So I think that you humanize yourself to your athletes, and that has been a bridge that has helped me is when they know that you have those same thoughts, when you become a little bit vulnerable with your life and then take off the superhero cape, they tend to receive the olive branch.
Trust, probably the glue that binds everything, right? And as weird as it sounds, I know we can laugh all you want, but I remember hearing probably 10 years ago, Chip Morton, who was a strength coach for the Cincinnati Bengals, a friend of mine. He's now at South Carolina. He gave a presentation at a strength and conditioning conference on love. And I remember like, what's this guy talking about? But you know what? The reality is trust is, to me, synonymous as a coach with that. And when you build that, it doesn't matter what kind of a program it is, the perception of the program Keith and I talked off air may be more important than the program itself. So, want to pivot slightly. Both of you, storied wrestling careers. You guys are leaders now. You are coaches at the university level. You're leaders. You're responsible, or you might argue, are not responsible for building culture. But my first question, leadership, Keith, is that a top down or bottom up process?
That's a good question. Yeah, I think that. I mean, you certainly see it from. I always like to think it starts at the top, and if I'm behaving like a lunatic, I can't ask my athletes to be calm, or
Sure.
to stay focused and do the right things off the mat. If I'm not doing that, so So yeah, I guess I look at it that way. But leadership in general, to me, like for me, I just try to really everything we're talking about. I just try to do that with myself. Is like you almost have to get rid of your ego and constantly check your ego, and because it's not about you. It's about the kids in your program, and then making sure that like when I'm talking to them, this is to benefit them and not just to, I don't know, stroke my ego or to get them to do the things that I would like them to do. Because I think that is when building a culture, you could have this idea of like, I want my team to be like this, but that's just like stroking your ego. You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
And we have 32 kids on the team and they're 32 individuals. And so you have to of course, you want to do the right kind of things. Like, you want to be a good citizen off the mat and you don't want to be causing trouble and things like that. That's kind of obvious bottom of the barrel type stuff, but who are we going to be as a team? From a leadership perspective, I have to make sure that it's about them and not about me. And
Sure.
that's something that I think goes a long way. And you just keep constantly checking that ego.
Tervel.
Yeah, I think the ego thing is big because the easiest time to see it is when you're coaching your son. Because if your son loses, and especially like, there's people in small town Nebraska that when they beat Dlagnev, they think they beat me,
Yeah.
right? And it's like, we didn't beat me, you beat my son. He's been wrestling for 3 weeks. You know? So, but it's they act like they get to take my Olympic medal home with them. So that is a moment where it's like, are they a better coach? Are they a better father? Are they a better man? Why did they beat my son? Right. So you start to go crazy, your head goes crazy. And in those moments, you just got to remember that you can't do it for them. Developmental curve is different. And so ego is massive. And in our sport, just like that, so at a lesser degree, is your guys. I mean, they start to feel like our sons, and you love these kids, but our job is to build trust. That's the fastest way to development. Development comes after trust. And so that's why you tend to see some people come equipped with easy trust. So I think the legends of our sport have the strongest team identities. There's some coaches right now that are very successful coaches that weren't legends, right? Tom Ryan, he's won the Nationals for the Ohio State. Not a lot of people had a Tom Ryan poster on their wall growing up, right? Mark Manning, who's my head coach, he's coached one of possibly the greatest American wrestler of all time, Jordan Burroughs. No one had a Mark Manning poster, right? Maybe a few people had a Keith Gavin poster, maybe a few people had it, but almost everyone had a John Smith poster, a Cale Sanderson poster, a Tom Brands poster, right? And so the legends of our sport, when you go to those programs, it's almost like if John Smith says stand on your head and eat Fruit Loops is the way to be a champion, you do it. You don't question it. The next tier down, you have to earn that trust. Some kids come to you and say, what can you do for me? So some of these legends come equipped with deep trust. So that's why you look at the Okie State, they all try to wrestle like him. Where some of the branching out programs, Minnesota, Pitt, Nebraska, there's more of a hodgepodge. And I think there's good and bad to that, right? I like different identities, I like different styles, but when you're trying to hone in on one group identity, sometimes it's harder because you have some guys are like, nah, it's just not how I do it. That's just not how I do it. And you're like, please, I'm telling you, just this one piece of your wrestling, hone it in. So I think that the challenge is, it does, like Keith said, it's personal behavior, especially the head coach. The head coach, there's something mystical and bizarre about, if the assistants, you can have 3 Olympic champs as your assistants, but the culture follows the head coach. The culture follows the head coach. If the head coach is a lunatic, there will always be some anxiety in the program. If the head coach is mentally tough, and then there's always a spin. Your program will always follow the deep values of the head coach. If the head coach wants to go hard and hand fight, you'll start to see that bleed in. If he's funky and likes to scramble, you'll start to see that bleed in. If he likes to shoot 100 times, you'll start to see that bleed in. So the culture follows the head coach. It's a very mystical thing, but I think that it's massively important. All the things that Keith said is if the head coach is trying to self-improve themselves, the culture will strengthen.
I know wrestling for the most part, and correct me if I'm wrong, is more of a no frills type sport, right? My question is to from an environmental standpoint. Obviously, building trust is key. Coaching, that stuff is massively important. I heard a quote a long time ago. It says, "Great coaches are a lot like gardeners. Gardeners don't grow flowers; they create an environment for flowers to grow." How do you till the garden? Keith, is it just your voice and then you trust your leaders at the top? Are there anything? Do speakers come in to talk to your guys? Is it a great relationship? Do you work out with the boys to build the trust in the beginning? Is there anything like that? Or is it just you leading from the top and trusting your leaders to lead?
Yeah, I think it's mainly that. I think that I try to just be honest with them and with myself, and that way, because I feel like the kids are, they could kind of see through the BS a lot, right?
Sure.
So that's a easy way to lose trust. But also like the ego thing, going back to that, it's just you have to really any mistake that I've made, probably, I was thinking this the other day as a head coach, like you look back and you're like, dang, I wish I didn't do it that way, or I wish I made a different decision. It's because of you were trying to do like, oh, I'm a head coach now, so I have to, this is what head coaches do, It's like you're living up to that like a label and not being yourself, where that's just dishonest, right? So you have to be who you are, and the realization that nobody wins solely because of their coach, right? It's like the coach could help you. The coach is there. He could help you. A lot of people probably win despite their coach. But right. I mean, we probably all know cases like that. But to think that, like, like, this is funny. Like, we had a big win this season as in a duel, and my joke to the team afterwards were like, well, now you guys finally listened, and it's like, but people really believe that sometimes, like I've been around people that were like, you're beating someone. It's like, well, now they're listening, like it's all that stuff that you told them, and it's like that's just not how it works.
Yep.
So I think that realization of, like, I'm here to help them. You try to recruit people to your program that have a strong desire and passion for the sport. Um, if you're dealing with a younger group, that's a big piece of it. Is like you're trying to light that flame a little bit, and get them passionate about it. But once you have that, it's almost like, you're there to help. They're not going to win solely because of you. You're there to help, and I think that is having that awareness is key.
We're on the decline of the developmental bell curve at this age group, I think. I think that there's an age, I don't know what it is, but it's somewhere between 8 and 16. Right? Anyone you talk to with an overdeveloped anything, they have a similar story. If you see a kid with giant lats and you go, dude, do you just work your back all day? And you go, no, but when I was 10, my dad had me do 100 pull-ups a day. A kid with massive quads, do you squat a ton? Actually, no. But when I was 9, my dad had me do all kinds of jumps and crazy leg exercises from the ages of 9 to 12, ages of 10 to 14, ages of 7 to 11. Right? It's somewhere in that. That's the steep upward hill of the bell curve of development. Then the top, and 20. We enter around here. Some people a little different, but 22, you're professionalizing. If you don't have an identity, you better find one, and then you better start to mold it and be very specific. But that beginning curve is, like what you said, is mental toughness developed. I think in those ages is where it's developed. But when you give them to us, it's almost like it's so hard to change what was instilled. If from the ages of 12 to 14, or from 8 to 14, you wrestled because you thought your parents wouldn't love you if you lost, and you never uproot that mentality and you give them to us, no matter how funny it sounds to us, it'll affect them. If at the age of 10, you only liked wrestling because you gained Twitter followers and no other you didn't find anything about the physical present of, like, the actual 7 minutes that you liked, it'll be a problem. And it's very hard to give you that at 22. So yeah, I mean, that's why finding that, I think that, a big part of us going around to clinics and coaches clinics is also trying to educate other coaches that, hey, when you're coaching that 10-year-old, remind them to do cool moves. Don't just win. Don't just neurotically win. Don't just be so afraid to make a mistake. Like make a bunch of mistakes. There's no trophy you could win at the age of 12 that's gonna make me recruit you or not recruit you at 18. Not a one. If you're sweet at 18, I'm gonna recruit you, even if you lost every match at 12. If you stink at 18, I'm not gonna recruit you, even if you won everything at 12. There's not a single trophy. It's where you end. There's not one trophy that's going to make you recruitable or not recruitable at the age of 12. So stop trying to win trophies and do cool wrestling moves.
Yeah, I think that's I mean, we always say all the time, I've been like, if you would do whatever it is that you're doing, not just wrestling, but if you would do it and nobody knew and you got no attention for it and you would still do it, you're in a pretty good place with that thing.
Well, especially with social media and everything else, right? Oh my
Right.
good
And so that's
gosh.
what's tough. It's like you have to have a pretty pure intent if you're trying to be really good at this.
One more question on leadership. I heard this. It just smacked me one. It was on social media, and I think the gentleman. I think he's the head coach for the football team at Georgia. His name's Kirby Smart, and it was a 35, 40-second clip on the cost of leadership. And I looked at it as a small business owner, and managing a small team. I look at it from a hockey background and the teams that I've been in a leadership position, whether I was an assistant captain or a captain. And here's the three costs of leadership. You have to make tough decisions that may negatively affect the people you care about. Number two, you may be disliked despite your best attempt to do the best for the most. And number three, you may be misunderstood and never get the chance to explain yourself. So my question is, does that parlay with football? If not, what's the cost of your leadership? Tervel.
Yeah, I mean, every one of those, absolutely. Obviously, I don't take the blunt end of it yet. I'm not a head coach, so I think that again, a lot of that falls on the head coach, just as a matter of factly, and so that's why the head coach is a very high stress position that they have to manage, even more so.
Sure.
But I think the one that enters into our sport that goes back to ego, because again, it's not like wrestling. Yeah, if you stink, you're gonna get fired. Like for years and years, but we have a much longer leash than football, right?
Sure.
We have a much longer leash than somebody like it's like if you're dipping into the top 20, if Keith produces an All-American here and there, and like they're not like over Keith's head, like where's the national title? You got 3 years, you're on a clock. It's
We
like
had national champ last year. No,
no, as a team,
That's coaching, baby. It's coaching.
I'm just kidding. He listens really well to me.
He was, and he looked bizarrely a lot like you.
Yeah.
I still want to. I know the age doesn't make sense, but I want to see that DNA test.
Yeah.
So, but so it's like, yeah, he's gonna like But the reality is like to win a team title, it's like, hey, have you beat Penn State yet? Not today. Okay, tomorrow. Okay, by next week, I need you to beat Penn State. It's not that. There's not a neuroticism. Maybe some programs do, but it's like people are like, you have time. They give you time, and so like especially if your football team is struggling, it's like as long as if we're just following the rules, they're gonna just let you figure it out and then do good stuff as long as you're a good leader and a good man. So I think that, but the one that for us is the ego piece. It's if there's an injustice toward who gets the credit, right? So the picture that I painted for myself that I try to live by is, what if you get an athlete that no one's ever heard of, but just get an athlete and he's normal and he works with you. And for some reason, everything you say is gold. And everything you say and do, and every concept that you've created in your brain that you say to him works for him. Everything. You should do this, it works. You should do this, it works. And he gets raised to the height of the utmost glory. And he achieves things that you couldn't, that no one else could. Even with your own concepts, he does them better than you in practice. And along the way, you have helped this person reach the heights. And everyone in your inner circle understands the dynamic, and you guys love each other. And there comes a moment when he's reached the highest heights, and they put a microphone in his face, and they say, Who has helped you? And he says, no one, this is all me. I got to be okay with that because it was worth it. Even if credit isn't given, it was worth it. You help the kid. You help the kid. And if they don't want to divvy out credit, if gratitude is not their thing, if they aren't grateful, if they want to leave, if they want to take and never give, that's their prerogative. Your prerogative is to pour your best into every individual, even if you don't get anything in return.
Well, servantship in its purest form. Keith, cost of leadership. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I think that's dead on. You certainly, when I first became head coach, is certainly something I had to get used to. Because I mean, the reality of it is, you're just not going to make everybody happy. You can't.
That's right.
And at the end of the day, I think, I mean, another coach told me this is just as long as as long as your decisions that you're making are in the best interest of the program, that's all you could really do. It's impossible to make everybody happy all the time. So yeah, I mean, feeling the need to, like, oh, I should explain myself, or even with like our fans, like, well, why aren't we doing this, or how come we lost to these guys? And you're like, you want to fight back on that, but that's, again, that's your ego that wants to fight back on that, and it's not helpful. It's more of a distraction than anything else. So you just have to continue to make the best decision you can for the program, and not worry about that other stuff.
Final pivot, gentlemen. Advice to coaches, young coaches. And by the way, it doesn't have to be wrestling. This can be universal. Like, obviously, a high percentage of our listenership are hockey, but I'm just coaches, period. Keith, you and I spoke off air. Your son's now involved in hockey, and you talk about, I remember an unbelievable interview I had with Dave King. Dave King was the first Blue Jackets head coach, coached the Canadian national team for eons of years. And he talked about his rule for his kids growing up. He said, I never ever spoke poorly about the coach in
Mhm.
front of the kids, because it
Yeah.
left a lasting impression, and it kind of stained the relationship. If ever I
Yeah.
had an issue and the kid was a young kid. Anyways, these are some of the lessons that perhaps are universal, but advice to coaches regardless of sport.
I think a lot of what we already talked about, but I'd say, to keep it simple, is to be yourself and try not to copy anybody else, or try to live up to some label that you have in your head, because I think that if you're in a coaching position, somebody entrusted you to do that, and you probably earned your way into that, right? So be yourself, and continue to build off of what already got you there.
Tervel.
Yeah, I would say the work for you is not done. So never stop fighting your fight. In our sport, it's very common for the best athletes to become the coaches. Right? That's not every sport, but that's wrestling. Is you were sweet as an athlete, come on and coach. Because and it makes sense, because there's a very, very deep feeling. There's a feel element to wrestling. It's very proprioceptive. So you touch, you feel. So just because it looks a certain way doesn't mean it feels a certain way. So I think the people that feel it, that's why our coaches, Keith probably still wrestles his guys. I wrestle my guy, like I touch them, right? Our football coach isn't putting on pads and getting in there, and he's not throwing balls, but we touch our athletes. There's a proprioception to wrestling that you got to explain. So as an athlete, the task is be mentally tough, stay in the moment, don't be surprised when it's hard, you know, have an incredible skill umbrella, be passionate, stay positive, be very conditioned, don't be whiny, right? All that stuff we ask them to do.
Yep.
As a coach, it's not just, well, I served my time, now I can be a maniac, right? Like, you must be emotionally controlled. I know you want to wring that kid's neck because he's not listening, but don't. Appeal to his better sense, appeal, right? Give him a hug, talk to him a day later. Don't yell, don't scream, don't hissy fit, don't cry about this. Uphold the standards you ask of your team. And then the second one is, you cannot force anyone to be great.
Hmm.
You cannot, it's very difficult to stifle greatness or to create it, right? You nurture it, and you can help the 5%, right? Like Keith said, your coach can help you. I would say it's as much as 10% max, probably less. 10% is gracious. Your support, everything outside of your own brain is 10%. You're 90%. If there's greatness in you, as a bad coach, I can bring you down 10%. You will still achieve 90% of the things you set out to do. If you're awesome and I can help you 10%. That last little bit to fill in your cup, to help you understand, to ease you, to take stress off of you. So know your place. Know your place. Understand that you're not the 100, you're the 10. So with that, have compassion. Have compassion. They're trying to win. They want to win. You being disappointed that they didn't win will never help them win. Come alongside them. Be curious at how you're both going to solve the problem together. And when it doesn't happen, remember it's hard on them too, not just you.
Excellent. Last question for you both, off the cuff. Sorry, this is not written down. Legacy. And I know probably, Keith, you're a man of few words, maybe 2 or 3, but I'm gonna dig deeper here. Both of you guys, outstanding human beings, we had the opportunity to work with, consummate professionals, storied careers as wrestlers. Now you're in a leadership position. How do you want people to remember long after you leave the sport? You're done. You're not coaching anymore. You've retired. Your son's playing the National Hockey League now, Keith.
You better be.
How do you want to? What is your legacy?
Honestly, I don't even think about that stuff because I feel like it's a distraction or maybe even a trap you could fall into as you start worrying about what people are going to think of you, and those people you probably don't even know who they are, so
Sure.
yeah, I think that if you start worrying too much about what your legacy is going to be or what people are going to think of you, and then you start getting away from why you're doing it, and like we said, it's like you're there to help people, and in our position you're there to help these kids that have a strong desire to master their craft in the sport of wrestling, and you got to keep the main thing, keep and keep that the focus. Like Terrell said, I mean, it's not like we have 100% control over that. And so, yeah, I think if you're worried about legacy and what people are going to think of you, you have a better chance of screwing it up and screwing up the kids that have a pretty strong desire.
Fair enough. Tervel.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I'm very similar. I'm a man of faith. I'm a Christian. I believe. I believe in the life of Christ and what He's done for me. So I think that my legacy falls deeply on my faith and who God thinks I am. But and with that, I just think one word comes to mind: contentment. I want to be perceived as a content man, not someone that's okay with their circumstances always, not someone that's not. I want to be constantly improving, but I don't want this neurotic sense of different circumstances. I want to, there's when I meet people that are content, that have a peace about them, that understand that they're not going to be the best every day. They're trying, but they understand that they just it's the infinite game.
Mm.
Life development, character is the infinite game. I want people to know. I just want people to see a content man and see that I'm very happy with what I have. I'm very happy with where I am. And I want that to be kind of the sense that people get from me. But before you take us off, one of the questions you didn't ask, you said, "Who are your mentors?" I'll give you a shout out because you're one of my mentors.
Thanks,
So
man.
so
That means a lot.
obviously, in the realm of strength and conditioning, your philosophy has shaped how I understand energy system work, and just more than anything I've ever done in my life. Right? I mean, it's this idea that when I was working out with you, I was doing the least amount of work and was the strongest I've ever been. And so you taught me how to be okay with that. You gave me a clear picture of it's not about what's on the sheet of paper, it's about the feeling of it. It's about how you feel. Do you feel good? Well, yes. Well, then don't do the rest of the sheet. Right? There was days you'd kick me out. And I'm like, but I gotta finish my squats, So you really
Nah.
You really changed me. And everything I preach, anytime, every time the topic goes to exterior work, every time the topic goes into cross training or things to add to the practice, I basically spout off everything I learned from you.
Oh,
Yeah.
man.
Yeah, I agree with Tervel. I mean, I'm constantly talking about that stuff with our athletes because I think it was a time in our careers and Tervel and I's where that was very new to us, and I know just as he's saying, I learned a ton just about how to train and yeah, so we're appreciative of that.
Oh, guys, made my day. I appreciate it. Our guests today have been Tervel, Dlagnev, and Keith Gavin. Gentlemen, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.